I was standing on my own land watching someone pour concrete all over it, which is how I learned the HOA thinks a 40-year-old plat map trumps an actual deed. The morning had started normally enough. I'd been living in my house on the corner of Sycamore Ridge Road for 3 months, enjoying the quiet of Rutherford County, Tennessee, when the rumble of cement mixers woke me at dawn. I pulled on jeans and boots and walked outside to find an entire construction crew setting up on the vacant lot I owned next door. Not near it, on it. They'd already graded the land and were laying forms for what looked like an elaborate entrance feature, complete with brick columns and decorative stonework. "Excuse me," I called to the foreman, a stocky man with a clipboard. "What's going on here?" He barely glanced up. "HOA entrance project. Should have gotten the notice." "I didn't get any notice, and this is my property." That got his attention. He frowned and checked his paperwork. "This is Lot A, the common area for Sycamore Ridge Estates. No, this is Lot 12, which I bought in April. I have a deed." The foreman's frown deepened, but before he could respond, a silver Lexus pulled up and a woman in her mid-50s climbed out. She had that particular haircut, the one that screams, "I want to speak to your manager," from 50 yards away, and she was already irritated before she reached us. "Is there a problem?" she asked, directing the question at the foreman while looking at me like I was a stray dog. "This gentleman says he owns this lot," the foreman said. "That's ridiculous. I'm Karen Ellsworth, HOA president, and this is clearly marked as common area on the original plat. We've been planning this entrance for 2 years. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know what you think you bought, but this land belongs to the Homeowners Association. Now, if you don't mind, we have work to do." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd saved of my deed. "This document says otherwise. Recorded with the county in April, the developer sold me this lot." Karen didn't even look at my phone. "The developer had no right to sell common area. Whatever you think you bought, it's a mistake. We'll sort it out later, but right now, we're pouring this entrance. We have permits." "Permits for someone else's land?" "Permits for HOA common area." Her voice had gone sharp. "I don't have time for this. Greg, continue with the pour." The foreman, Greg, looked between us uncomfortably. "Madam, if there's a title dispute." "There's no dispute. This person is clearly confused about property lines. The entrance goes here, as planned. We have a landscape architect coming at noon, and we're not delaying a $200,000 project because someone doesn't understand how subdivisions work." I felt my jaw tighten. "I understand perfectly. I also understand trespassing and property damage. If you pour concrete on my lot, I'll have it removed at your expense." Karen's face flushed. "Are you threatening the HOA?" "I'm informing you that you're about to commit an expensive mistake. The only mistake here is yours in thinking you can interfere with a community project. Now please leave before I call the sheriff for harassment." I almost laughed. She was on my property threatening to call the cops on me. But I could see this wasn't going anywhere productive, and the concrete truck was already backing into position. I needed documentation and legal advice, not a shouting match with someone who'd already decided I didn't matter. "Pour your concrete," I said, "but I'm putting you on notice that you're doing it on private property without permission. Everything that follows is on you." I walked back to my house, took photographs of everything: the crew, the equipment, the concrete forms, Karen's Lexus with its license plate visible, and then called the attorney who'd handled my closing. Diane Kellerman had been thorough and professional during the purchase, and I'd been impressed by how carefully she'd reviewed every document. If anyone could make sense of this situation, she could. Her office was in Murfreesboro, a 20-minute drive. I reached her assistant, who said Diane was in court all morning but could see me at 2 o'clock. I said I'd be there. By the time I got back outside, they were pouring. The concrete flowed gray and wet into the forms, and a team of workers smoothed it with practiced efficiency. Karen stood watching with her arms crossed, looking satisfied. When she saw me, she made a point of turning her back. I took more photos. Then I drove to the county recorder's office and requested copies of everything related to Lot 12 in the original Sycamore Ridge plat. The clerk, a patient woman named Martha, pulled the files and let me review them at a table in the corner. The original plat map from 1984 showed Sycamore Ridge Estates as a planned subdivision of 37 homes. Lot A was marked as common area and sat exactly where my lot was now. But there was a revision filed in 1987, and then another in 2003, and then a final subdivision in 2019. Each revision changed the lot numbers and configurations as the developer adjusted plans over the decades. By the time the 2019 version was recorded, Lot A no longer existed as common area. It had been replatted as Lot 12, a buildable residential lot with 60 feet of road frontage on Sycamore Ridge Road. The developer, Sycamore Properties LLC, had sold me Lot 12 with a clean deed in April. I'd paid cash $75,000 for just under an acre on the corner, planning to eventually build a garage or workshop. The title search Diane had ordered showed no liens, no encumbrances, no claims from the HOA. I made copies of everything and drove to Diane's office with a folder full of ammunition. Her office was in a converted house near the courthouse, painted dove gray with black shutters. The sign out front read, "Kellerman and Associates, Real Estate Law." I'd liked that she specialized in exactly what I needed rather than being a general practitioner trying to do everything. Diane met me in the lobby herself at 2 o'clock sharp. She was in her late 30s, tall and slim, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and brown eyes that paid attention. She'd been straightforward during the closing, explaining everything without talking down to me, and she'd caught a potential easement issue that the developer had needed to resolve before we could proceed. I'd trusted her then. I trusted her now. "Yates," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "Your message said it was urgent. The HOA is pouring a concrete entrance on my lot as we speak." Her eyebrows rose. "Come back to my office." I followed her down a hallway lined with bookshelves to a corner office that looked out on a magnolia tree. Her desk was organized chaos, files stacked neatly but everywhere. She cleared a chair for me and sat down behind her desk. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her everything, showing her the photos on my phone as I went. When I mentioned Karen's name, Diane's expression shifted slightly. "Karen Ellsworth. I know her. She's been HOA president at Sycamore Ridge for about 5 years, runs it like a personal fiefdom." Diane opened her laptop and pulled up files. "When I did your title search, there was no indication that Lot 12 was anything other than what the deed claimed. Let me review the chain of title." She worked in silence for several minutes, pulling up documents and cross-referencing plat maps. I watched her face as she read, seeing the moment she found what she was looking for. "Here's what happened," Diane said finally. "The original 1984 plat designated Lot A as common area, and the developer's declaration of covenants transferred it to the HOA. But in the 2019 replatting, the developer redrew the entire subdivision. Lot A ceased to exist, and its land was incorporated into the new Lot 12. The developer should have filed paperwork explicitly removing that land from the HOA's common areas, but it looks like they didn't. They just changed the plat map. So who owns it? Me or the HOA? You do. A deed trumps a 40-year-old plat map every time. The developer had the right to replat the property. They retained ownership of Lot A until they sold it to you. The HOA never actually owned the land. They only had it designated as common area subject to the developer's control. When the developer replatted, that designation ended. You bought it with a valid deed, recorded with the county, with title insurance. It's yours." I felt a wave of relief followed immediately by anger. Then what the hell are they doing building on it? My guess? Karen either doesn't know about the replatting or doesn't care. She's working off old documents and assuming she's right. Diane closed her laptop and looked at me seriously. "The problem is, they're already pouring. Once that concrete sets, removing it becomes complicated and expensive. We need to act fast." "What do I do?" "Legally, you can demand they stop and remove everything they've built. You can file for an injunction and sue for trespassing and property damage. But there's something you should know first." She pulled out a larger map and spread it on her desk. "Look at this." It was a survey of the entire Sycamore Ridge subdivision. She pointed to my lot on the corner, where Sycamore Ridge Road met County Highway 96. The entrance they're building isn't just decorative. It's the main vehicular access to the entire subdivision. The only other way in or out is a dirt lane here, on the backside of the property that connects to a county maintenance road. Legally, it's an access point, but it's unpaved, narrow, and hasn't been maintained. Nobody uses it. I studied the map. So their main entrance is entirely on my property? It appears so. The old entrance was farther down Sycamore Ridge Road, on what used to be common area, but when the developer replatted, they shifted everything. I don't think the HOA ever updated their understanding of the boundaries. What happens if I make them remove the entrance? Diane leaned back in her chair. Technically, the residents can still access their homes via the back lane, but it would be a nightmare. That lane was never designed for daily traffic. It's barely one car wide in places. Can you imagine 37 households trying to use it as their primary access? School buses, delivery trucks, emergency vehicles? That's not my problem. Legally, you're right, but practically it becomes everyone's problem, including yours because you live there. She looked at me carefully. Yates, I'm not saying you don't have every right to be angry. You do. They're building on your land without permission. That's outrageous. But before we go nuclear, you should think about what you actually want to achieve. I want them off my property. Okay, we can make that happen. But consider this. You have leverage now. Enormous leverage. The HOA built their main entrance on land they don't own, and there's no practical alternative. You could force them to tear it out. Or you could negotiate, make them buy an easement at fair value, put everything in writing, get paid for what they're using. You end up with money and a legal arrangement. They end up with a legitimate entrance. Everyone walks away better than they are now. I wanted to say no immediately. The idea of letting Karen Ellsworth off the hook made my blood pressure spike. But Diane was making sense. I didn't actually want to trap my neighbors. Most of them probably had no idea this was happening. This was Karen's project, Karen's screw-up. And if I could get paid for the land they were using while also establishing clear boundaries going forward, that was better than a protracted legal fight that would make me the villain in my own neighborhood. How much are we talking about? I asked. For an easement like this? At least $50,000, probably more. The entrance they're building looks expensive, and they clearly consider this corner essential. You're negotiating from strength. Diane pulled out a legal pad. Here's what I recommend. We file an immediate cease and desist, putting them on notice that they're trespassing. We attach the deed and plat documentation so they can't claim ignorance. Then we offer to negotiate an easement agreement. If they're smart, they'll jump at it. If they're stubborn, we file for an injunction and damages. Either way, you win. What if Karen just ignores the cease and desist? Then we go to court and she'll wish she'd negotiated. A judge will order them to stop construction, and depending on how the HOA handled this, there could be personal liability for Karen if she acted outside her authority or ignored due diligence. Building on someone else's property isn't a small thing. I thought about it. The concrete was already poured, which meant they'd be working on the brick columns and landscaping next. Every day they continued, they'd be investing more money into an illegal project on my land. And when the bill came due, it would hurt. Let's do the cease and desist, I said, but make it clear I'm open to negotiation. I don't want to be unreasonable, but I'm not going to be walked over either. That's the right approach. Diane pulled her laptop back over and started typing. I'll have this drafted by end of business today. We'll send it certified mail and email to make sure they get it immediately. Send it to Karen. To her and to the HOA's registered agent. That way, if Karen tries to hide it or delay, other board members will know what's happening. I thanked her and drove home. The construction crew was gone, but the entrance was taking shape. The concrete had been poured for foundations in the main driveway apron. Forms outlined where brick columns would rise on either side. Flags marked locations for landscaping. It would have been impressive if it weren't sitting on my land without permission. I parked and walked over to examine the work up close. The crew had been professional. The concrete was smooth and level, the forms precise. They'd clearly spent serious money already. I wondered how much Karen had told the HOA board about the project. Had she verified the property lines? Had anyone questioned whether this was actually common area? Or had she bulldozed ahead, confident in her authority, assuming the old plat map was all she needed? My phone buzzed, a text from Diane. Cease and desist drafted, sending tonight, expect fireworks. I texted back a thumbs up and went inside to make dinner. Part of me wished I could be there when Karen got the letter. The other part knew this was about to get uglier before it got better. The fireworks arrived at 8:30 the next morning in the form of Karen's Lexus screeching to a stop in my driveway. She got out holding a sheaf of papers and marched to my front door like she was leading a cavalry charge. I watched through the window as she rang the doorbell, then pounded on the door when I didn't answer immediately. I took my time, made her wait. Then I opened the door and leaned against the frame. "Can I help you?" Karen's face was crimson. "This cease and desist letter is absurd. You're trying to extort the HOA. I'm asserting my property rights. There's a difference. You don't own that land. I've checked with our attorney, and the original plat clearly designates it as common area. Whatever deed you think you have, it's invalid. Then you have nothing to worry about. See you in court." "We're not going to court over this nonsense. The entrance project continues as planned. If you interfere, we'll sue you for harassment and interference with HOA operations." I almost admired her commitment to being wrong. "Karen, I've given you documentation showing that I own Lot 12, including the land you're building on. My attorney has confirmed the chain of title. You're trespassing. You can either negotiate with me like a reasonable person, or you can wait for a judge to explain it to you. Your choice. The HOA doesn't negotiate with bullies." Good thing I'm not a bully then. I'm a property owner defending my rights. But since you brought it up, let's talk about bullying. You showed up on my land with a construction crew, ignored me when I told you it was my property, and threatened to call the cops on me for objecting. Now you're at my door calling me names because I dared to hire a lawyer. Who's the bully here? Karen's mouth opened and closed. For a second, I thought she might actually hear herself, but then her face hardened again. "The HOA board meets tomorrow night. We'll be discussing this situation and determining our response. Expect consequences." "I'll look forward to it." She turned and stalked back to her Lexus, tires squealing as she pulled out. I called Diane and told her about the conversation. "She's doubling down," Diane said. "That's a mistake on her part. Keep documenting everything. If she shows up again, record it if you can. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, so you're legally allowed to record conversations you're part of." "You think she'll keep building?" "I think she's in too deep to back down easily. People like Karen don't admit mistakes. She'll need to be forced, probably by her own board once they realize the liability." The construction crew returned that afternoon. I went outside and spoke to Greg, the foreman. "Did the HOA tell you about the property dispute?" I asked. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Ellsworth said it was handled." "It's not handled. That cease and desist letter my attorney sent was real. You're building on private property without the owner's permission. I'm not trying to jam you up, but you should know the HOA might not be able to pay you if this goes south." Greg's discomfort deepened. "I've got a contract with an HOA that's building on land they don't own. Just saying, you might want to get paid up front for the work you've done so far." I went back inside and let him chew on that. By the next morning, the crew hadn't returned. Apparently, Greg had decided discretion was the better part of not getting stiffed on a six-figure construction project. The HOA board meeting was at 7 o'clock on Thursday night, held in the community clubhouse at the back of the subdivision. I wasn't a member of the HOA. I'd bought my house before the cutoff point where membership became mandatory, but the meetings were technically open to residents. I decided to attend. The clubhouse was a modest building with a meeting room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. About 15 people were there when I arrived, mostly older residents who seemed to attend every meeting out of habit or civic duty. Karen sat at a table in front with 4 other board members, 2 men and 2 women. She saw me come in and her expression went nuclear, but she couldn't kick me out without causing a scene. I sat in the back and listened as the board worked through routine business, landscaping contracts, a complaint about a barking dog, discussion of the community pool schedule for summer. Then Karen cleared her throat. "Final item tonight is an update on the entrance project. As most of you know, we've been working on a beautiful new entrance feature to enhance property values and community pride. Unfortunately, we've encountered an obstacle. One of our residents has made spurious claims about the property where the entrance is being built. We're consulting with our attorney to resolve this quickly so construction can resume." One of the other board members, a retired accountant named Paul, frowned. What kind of claims? He says he owns the lot. It's clearly common area, but he's insisting otherwise and has sent threatening legal letters. Paul looked at me. Everyone looked at me. Would you like to explain your position? Paul asked. I stood up. Happy to. I bought Lot 12 from the developer in April. It's the corner lot where the entrance is being built. I have a recorded deed showing I own that land. The HOA is building on private property without permission. I've offered to negotiate an easement agreement so the entrance can stay, but Mrs. Ellsworth refuses to even discuss it. Karen's voice was ice. The original plat shows that land as HOA common area. It's been common area for 40 years. The plat was revised in 2019, I said. The developer replatted the subdivision, and Lot A ceased to exist. The land became Lot 12, which was sold to me. The deed is recorded with Rutherford County. My attorney has confirmed the chain of title. I'm happy to provide documentation to the board. Paul looked at Karen. Did you verify property lines before starting construction? Of course, we used the original plat. Not the current plat, Karen hesitated. The original plat has always been the governing document. That doesn't sound right. Paul turned to the other board members. Did anyone get a new survey or title report before we approved this project? Silence. One of the women, a real estate agent named Linda, spoke up carefully. I assumed you'd done due diligence, Karen. This is a major project. I did do due diligence. The plat is clear. Then let's see the documentation, Paul said. Both sides. Karen, provide whatever you relied on. Mr. Yancey, if you can share your deed and title information, that would help. We need to know what we're dealing with before we proceed. I pulled out my phone. I can email everything to the board right now if you give me addresses. Paul provided his email, and so did Linda and the other two board members. Karen sat rigid, her jaw clenched. I sent the files, my deed, the 2019 plat map, the title insurance commitment, and Diane's summary of the title chain. Then I sat down and waited. Paul opened the files on his phone and read in silence. His face went through several stages of concern, confusion, and finally resignation. He looked at Karen. This deed looks legitimate. It can't be. The developer didn't have the right to sell common area. According to this, it wasn't common area anymore. The developer replatted in 2019 and created Lot 12. If that replat was valid and it appears to be recorded with the county, then the developer owned the land and could sell it. Karen stood up. Our attorney will straighten this out. The HOA has rights here, and we're not going to be bullied into abandoning a project that benefits the entire community. Nobody's talking about bullying, Paul said quietly. We're talking about whether we build something on land we don't actually own. That's a serious problem. It's not a problem. It's a manufactured crisis by someone who wants to cause trouble, Linda spoke up. Karen, if we're building on private property, we need to stop immediately, the liability alone. There's no liability because it's not private property. Then why did you stop construction? Karen's face flushed. I didn't stop construction. The contractor delayed for scheduling reasons. I couldn't help myself. The contractor stopped because I told him the HOA was building on disputed property and might not be able to pay him. He's waiting to see how this shakes out. You interfered with our contractor? Karen's voice rose. That's tortious interference. We can sue you for that. Actually, he can't, Diane said. Everyone turned. I hadn't seen her come in, but there she was, standing in the doorway in jeans and a blazer, holding a messenger bag. She walked to the front of the room like she owned it. Diane Kellerman, attorney for Yates Yancey. I'm here as a courtesy to provide information to the board. Mr. Yancey has every right to inform contractors that they're working on disputed property. That's not interference, it's transparency. What would be interference is continuing to build on private property after being notified of a title issue. Karen's face was approaching purple. Who invited you? The meeting is open to residents and their representatives. I'm here to help clarify the legal situation so the board can make informed decisions. Diane pulled papers from her bag and handed copies to each board member. This is a summary of the title chain for Lot 12, including the replatting history and the deed to Mr. Yancey. As you'll see, the title is clear. The land belongs to him. The HOA has no recorded interest in Lot 12. Paul read the summary carefully. Linda and the other board members followed suit. I watched their faces change as they realized the magnitude of the problem. If this is accurate, Paul said slowly, then we've spent nearly $80,000 on site prep and concrete for an entrance we can't legally build. That's how much has been spent so far, Linda asked, her voice tight. The total project budget is $200,000. We've done grading, concrete work, and ordered materials for the brick columns and landscaping. On land we don't own. On land Karen assured us was common area. Karen slammed her hand on the table. It is common area. This is a scheme to extort money from the HOA. He waited until we started construction and then suddenly produced a deed. It's fraud. I bought the property in April, I said. 3 months before you started construction. I didn't know you were planning to build here until cement mixers woke me up. This isn't a scheme. It's you not doing your homework. Diane spoke calmly. Mrs. Ellsworth, if you have evidence that Mr. Yancey's deed is fraudulent or that the HOA has a superior claim to the property, please present it. Otherwise, you're making accusations that could themselves be legally problematic. Our attorney will handle this. I'm sure they will. In the meantime, the board should be aware of the options. Diane addressed the other board members. First, you can continue to dispute Mr. Yancey's ownership and litigate. That will be expensive and, based on the documentation, unsuccessful. Second, you can remove the construction and restore the property to its original condition. That will also be expensive. Third, you can negotiate an easement agreement with Mr. Yancey, which would allow the entrance to remain in exchange for fair compensation and a recorded legal right to use the property. That's the most cost-effective solution for everyone. Paul looked at me. You're willing to negotiate? I am. I don't want to be unreasonable. I understand the subdivision needs an entrance, but it's on my land, and that needs to be acknowledged and compensated fairly. What kind of compensation are we talking about? That's something we'd need to discuss in detail, but my attorney estimates an easement of this size and type would typically be valued at $50,000 to $75,000, plus legal costs to document everything properly. Linda winced. We don't have that in the budget. You were planning to spend $200,000 on the entrance, Diane pointed out. This would be an additional cost, but it's less than what you'd spend on litigation or removal and reconstruction elsewhere. We're not paying extortion, Karen said flatly. Paul ignored her. Can we have time to consult with our own attorney and review the documentation? Of course, Diane said, but I'd recommend you halt construction in the meantime. Every dollar you spend on that entrance before resolving the title issue is $1 at risk. Agreed. I'm making a motion to suspend the entrance project pending legal review. Paul looked at the other board members. Second? Linda raised her hand. Second. All in favor? 3 hands went up. Karen and 1 other board member, a man who seemed to be her ally, voted against. The motion passed. Karen stood up, her chair scraping loudly. This is a mistake. We're letting ourselves be intimidated by threats and bad faith legal arguments. When our attorney reviews this, you'll see I'm right. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out. The room sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment, then people began to gather their things and leave. Paul approached me and Diane. I apologize for this situation, he said quietly. I was told due diligence had been done. If I'd known there was any question about the property, I never would have voted to approve the project. I understand, I said. This isn't your fault. Still, it's a mess. I'll make sure our attorney gets all the documentation and reviews it properly. Karen means well, but she sometimes gets focused on a vision and doesn't want to hear about obstacles. She built a $200,000 entrance on someone else's land, Diane said. That's not an obstacle. That's a failure of basic due diligence. Paul nodded tiredly. I know. We'll get it sorted. Thank you for coming tonight. Diane and I walked out to the parking lot together. The night was warm, cicadas singing in the trees around the clubhouse. That went better than I expected, I said. Paul seems reasonable. Linda too. If they're the majority, you'll get a settlement. Karen's the problem, but she's only 1 vote. She's going to fight this. Let her. Every day she delays, the board gets more nervous about liability. Eventually, they'll settle over her objection or remove her from the decision-making process. Diane unlocked her car, then paused. You did well in there. Stayed calm, didn't take the bait when she tried to provoke you. I had a good lawyer. She smiled, and something shifted in the air between us. We'd been professional up to this point, attorney and client, but standing there in the parking lot under the streetlights, I saw her differently. Not just as the person helping me navigate a legal mess, but as someone I wanted to keep talking to even after this was over. Can I buy you dinner? I asked, as a thank you for coming tonight. Diane hesitated, and I thought I'd misread the moment. But then she nodded. I'd like that. There's a good barbecue place in town. We drove separately to Max BBQ, a local institution with picnic tables and a smoker out front that perfumed the air for blocks. Over pulled pork and sweet tea, we talked about things that had nothing to do with property lines or HOAs. She'd grown up in Nashville, gone to law school at Vanderbilt, and started her practice 5 years ago after working for a larger firm. She liked the independence of running her own office, even if it meant long hours and constant juggling. Why real estate law? I asked. I like that it's concrete, pun intended. Property has boundaries, deeds have language, surveys don't lie. It's not ambiguous the way some other areas of law can be, and when you solve a problem, it stays solved. You record the deed or the easement, and it's done. It's permanent. Unlike, say, divorce law. Unlike divorce law, personal injury, criminal defense, those are important, but they're messy in ways that would make me crazy. I like clean lines. Even when the HOA president is pouring concrete on my property. Especially then, because at the end of the day, the law is clear. You own it, she doesn't, and the rest is just noise. Diane took a sip of tea. What made you buy that lot? I liked the location, corner lot, road frontage, room to build a workshop eventually. I'm a carpenter by trade, mostly custom furniture and cabinetry. I wanted space to expand without neighbors complaining about the noise. You picked the wrong neighborhood for that. Apparently, though in fairness I didn't know the HOA would decide to build their grand entrance on my land. That was a surprise. Life's full of surprises. We talked until the restaurant closed, then stood in the parking lot, not quite ready to say goodnight. Finally, Diane checked her watch. I should go. Court in the morning. Can I call you? I asked. Not about the case, just to talk. She smiled. I'd like that. I drove home feeling better than I had in days. The HOA situation was still a mess, but at least I had allies now, and maybe something more than that. I parked in my driveway and walked around to look at the entrance construction in the moonlight. The concrete sat pale and ghostly, waiting for the brick columns that would never be built unless Karen came to her senses. I wondered how long she'd hold out. The answer came faster than I expected. 3 days later, I got a call from Diane. The HOA's attorney sent a letter. They're demanding you provide proof of ownership and threatening to sue for slander of title if you don't retract your claims. Slander of title. It's a legal theory that says you're making false claims about property ownership to harm the HOA's ability to use the land. It's nonsense in this case because your claims aren't false, but it shows they're escalating. So what do? We file a quiet title action. We go to court and ask a judge to confirm that you own the property and the HOA has no interest in it. Once we have that judgment, this is over. They can't keep pretending the plat map gives them rights that your deed contradicts. How long does that take? A few months usually. We file the complaint, they have to respond, there's discovery, then a hearing. But in a case this clear-cut, I'd expect it to settle before trial. Once the HOA's attorney actually reviews the title documents, they'll advise the board to negotiate, unless Karen overrides them. She can't. Well, she can, but then the board members become personally liable for wasting HOA resources on frivolous litigation. Paul and Linda won't let that happen. We filed the quiet title action the following week. The complaint laid out the facts simply. I owned Lot 12 by virtue of a recorded deed from the developer. The HOA claimed an interest based on an outdated plat map. The court needed to determine who was right. The HOA had 30 days to respond. In the meantime, the entrance sat unfinished, concrete foundations slowly weathering in the Tennessee heat. Some of my neighbors started giving me looks when I drove past them, the kind of looks that said they'd heard I was causing trouble. I understood their frustration. They probably didn't know the details, just that the nice new entrance project had been stopped because of some dispute. One afternoon, a woman from down the street knocked on my door. Her name was Patricia, and she was in her 70s, polite but clearly nervous. "I don't want to intrude," she said, "but several of us are confused about what's happening with the entrance. Karen told us you're blocking the project for personal reasons, but I saw you at the board meeting, and it sounded more complicated than that." I invited her in and made coffee. Then I explained the situation from the beginning, showing her the deed and plat maps on my laptop. Patricia listened carefully, asking good questions. "So you own the land," she said finally, "and Karen knew there was a question about it but started building anyway." "That's how it looks to me." "But you're willing to let the entrance stay if the HOA pays you for an easement?" "Correct. I'm not trying to hurt the neighborhood. I just want to be compensated fairly for the use of my property." Patricia nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable. I wish Karen had explained it that way. She made it sound like you were being vindictive." "I think Karen doesn't want to admit she made a mistake, but this isn't personal. It's about property rights." After Patricia left, I called Diane and told her about the conversation. "That's good," Diane said. "If the neighbors start asking questions, the board will feel pressure to settle. Karen's been controlling the narrative, but that only works if people don't look too closely." "How's the quiet title action going?" "The HOA filed their response yesterday. They're still claiming the plat map gives them common area rights, and they've added a claim that even if you own the land, you should be required to grant an easement under some creative theories about implied dedication and equitable estoppment." Translation: they're arguing you should have to give them the easement for free because the land was historically common area and people relied on it. It's a weak argument, but it's something. We'll respond and then move toward a hearing. How long? Hearing's scheduled for September. Judge Canton is assigned. He's practical and doesn't tolerate nonsense, which works in our favor. September was 2 months away. In the meantime, life continued. Life. The unfinished entrance became a neighborhood landmark, a concrete monument to overreach and poor planning. I worked on furniture projects in my garage, refinishing an antique dresser for a client in Nashville and building a custom dining table for a couple in Franklin. The work was soothing, the smell of wood and stain, the satisfaction of seeing joints fit perfectly. Diane and I had dinner again, and then a third time. We didn't talk much about the case. Instead, we talked about her practice, my work, our families. She'd been engaged once, years ago, but it hadn't worked out. I'd dated casually but never found someone I wanted to build a life with. We were both cautious people, careful about letting others in. But the caution felt less necessary when we were together. One evening in July, we drove out to a winery in Leiper's Fork and sat on the patio as the sun set over the rolling hills. Diane had her feet tucked up under her on the chair, a glass of white wine in her hand, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her. "This is nice," she said. "I forget to do things like this." All work and no play? Something like that. When you're running your own practice, there's always more to do. Another filing, another client call, another contract to review. It's easy to let it consume everything. You're good at it, though. The work, I mean. You're thorough. Thorough is a polite way of saying obsessive. No, I mean it. You caught that easement issue when I bought the property. You've been 3 steps ahead of the HOA the whole time. You care about getting it right, she smiled. "I do, maybe too much sometimes. My ex used to say I loved work more than him." "Did you?" "I don't know. Maybe I just didn't love him enough. Or maybe I'm not wired for the kind of relationship he wanted, where you come home and forget about the rest of the world. I can't do that. The work matters to me." "That doesn't mean you can't have both?" "In theory, sure. In practice, I haven't figured it out yet." She looked at me over the rim of her glass. "What about you? Why hasn't some smart woman snapped you up already?" "I've been waiting for someone who doesn't mind that I smell like sawdust and work in a garage." "I like the sawdust smell." "Then maybe you're the smart woman." She laughed, and we stayed at the winery until they closed, talking about nothing and everything, the case a distant concern that could wait until tomorrow. The HOA board met again in August to discuss settlement options. Paul called me beforehand to ask if I'd be willing to attend and present a proposal. I said yes, and worked with Diane to put together a presentation that was fair but firm. The meeting was tense from the start. Karen sat with her arms crossed, radiating hostility. Paul and Linda were cordial but businesslike. The other two board members seemed mostly interested in making the problem go away. I presented the proposal. The HOA would pay $60,000 for a permanent easement, allowing them to use the corner of my lot for the entrance. The easement would be clearly defined, recorded with the county, and include provisions for maintenance and liability. In exchange, I would drop the quiet title action and allow construction to resume immediately. That's extortion, Karen said before I'd even finished. It's fair market value, Diane replied. She'd come with me, sitting beside me with a folder of comparable easement sales in Rutherford County. An easement of this size and prominence in this location would typically sell for between $50,000 and $80,000. We're on the low end of that range. We shouldn't have to pay anything. It's common area, Paul cut in. Karen, our attorney has reviewed the title documents. He agrees that Mr. Yancey has a strong claim to ownership. We need to settle this. Our attorney is being overly cautious. Our attorney is keeping us out of a lawsuit we'll lose. Paul looked at me. Can the $60,000 be paid over time, or does it need to be a lump sum? We can structure it however works for the HOA. Payments over 2 years would be fine, with interest and a recorded lien until it's paid in full. Linda spoke up. We have about $30,000 in reserves. We could do a special assessment for the rest, split over the next year. It wouldn't be popular, but it's manageable. This is insane, Karen said. We're letting ourselves be robbed. We're resolving a legal issue that you created, Paul said, his voice sharper than I'd heard before. If you'd done a proper title search before starting construction, we wouldn't be in this position. Now we either settle on reasonable terms or we spend $100,000 on lawyers and still lose. Which would you prefer? Karen's face went tight. I did my due diligence. This is not my fault. You relied on a 40-year-old plat map without checking current records. That's not due diligence. That's negligence. Paul turned to the rest of the board. I'm moving that we accept Mr. Yancey's proposal and authorize payment of $60,000 over 2 years for a recorded easement. Second? Second, Linda said immediately. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Karen sat motionless, staring at the table. Motion passes. Karen, you're authorized to work with our attorney to finalize the agreement. Paul looked at me. Thank you for being reasonable about this. Thank you for seeing the situation clearly. After the meeting, Diane and I walked out to the parking lot. She looked pleased. That went well. You'll have the easement payment and clear title. They'll have their entrance. Everyone wins. Except Karen. Karen lost the moment she started building without checking the deed. This is just her realizing it. But Karen wasn't done. A week later, Diane called with an edge in her voice. The HOA attorney called. Karen is refusing to sign the settlement agreement. She's convinced the other board members made a mistake, and she's threatening to sue them personally if they proceed. Can she do that? No, but she can make noise and delay things. Paul is trying to work around her, but it's complicated. She's still the president, and some of the vendors won't proceed without her signature. So what now? Paul's calling for a special meeting to remove her as president. He has the votes, but it'll take a few weeks. In the meantime, the settlement is stalled. I felt frustration rising. Why can't she just accept reality? Because people like Karen don't accept reality. They bend the world to match their version of events, and when it doesn't work, they break things out of spite. The special meeting happened in early September, 2 days before the scheduled court hearing on the quiet title action. The meeting was ugly. Karen accused Paul of betraying the community, Linda of being manipulated, and me of orchestrating a conspiracy to defraud the HOA. She brought a stack of printed documents that she claimed proved her case, mostly printouts from legal websites about property law that didn't actually apply to our situation. Paul let her talk for 20 minutes, then called for a vote. Karen was removed as president by a vote of 4-1. Linda was appointed interim president. Karen walked out, slamming the door hard enough that the frame rattled. 2 days later, we were in court. Judge Canton was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the air of a man who'd heard every argument twice. He'd reviewed the filings and came into the hearing with questions. Ms. Kellerman, your client owns Lot 12 by recorded deed from the developer. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. The deed was recorded in April of this year and is clear on its face. And the HOA's position is that Lot 12 is actually common area designated on the original plat? The HOA's attorney, a young man named Brian, who looked like he'd drawn the short straw in this case, stood up. Your Honor, the original 1984 plat clearly shows Lot A as common area dedicated to the HOA. While there were subsequent replatting events, the HOA maintains that the original dedication was never formally revoked. Was Lot A included in the 2019 replat? No, Your Honor. The 2019 replat renumbered the lots, but so Lot A ceased to exist in the current plat. Technically, yes, and Lot 12, which is what we're here about, is shown on the current recorded plat as a residential lot with clear boundaries? Yes, Your Honor. And the developer who filed that plat subsequently sold Lot 12 to Mr. Yancey with a warranty deed? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Canton leaned back. Then I'm struggling to understand the HOA's position. If the developer replatted the property and Lot A ceased to exist, on what basis does the HOA claim an interest in Lot 12? Brian shifted uncomfortably. The HOA believes there was an implied dedication that survived the replatting. Based on what? Did the HOA ever own the land in fee simple? No, Your Honor. The original developer retained ownership subject to the common area designation. So when the developer replatted and removed that designation, what prevented them from selling the land? The HOA argues that 40 years of use as common area created an implied easement. 40 years of use of undeveloped land that the developer owned? That's not an easement. That's permission. Judge Canton looked at Diane. Ms. Kellerman, does your client have title insurance? Yes, Your Honor. The title commitment shows no exceptions for HOA claims or common area designations on Lot 12. Because there aren't any on the current recorded plat. Correct, Your Honor. Judge Canton made a note. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm granting the quiet title action. Mr. Yancey owns Lot 12 in fee simple, free of any HOA claims. The historical designation of the land as common area is irrelevant given the subsequent replatting and recorded deed. If the HOA wishes to use any portion of Lot 12 for an entrance or other purpose, they'll need to negotiate an easement with Mr. Yancey like anyone else would. Brian stood. Your Honor, the HOA has already invested significant funds in construction on that lot based on a good faith belief. Based on a 40-year-old plat map without checking current records. That's not good faith, Counselor. That's poor planning. The HOA's remedy, if any, is against whoever assured them they had the right to build there, not against Mr. Yancey, who simply bought property and received a valid deed. Judge Canton looked at me. Mr. Yancey, I understand you've offered to negotiate an easement? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I have no desire to harm the neighborhood. I'm willing to grant an easement on fair terms. That's gracious of you. I'm going to suggest the parties work that out without further court involvement. Ms. Kellerman, prepare the order granting quiet title. I'll sign it today. We walked out of the courthouse into bright September sunshine. Diane was trying not to grin. You won, she said. We won. Okay, we won. But it's your land, clear and uncontested. Karen can't touch you now. What happens to her? That's up to the HOA. If they're smart, they'll investigate whether she acted recklessly or outside her authority. Building on disputed property without board approval for due diligence could be grounds for personal liability. We went to lunch at a cafe near the courthouse, celebrating with sandwiches and iced tea. Diane's phone buzzed halfway through the meal. She checked it, and her eyebrows rose. Linda just emailed. The HOA board voted to accept your settlement proposal and is moving forward with the easement agreement. She wants to schedule a signing next week. That was fast. They know they lost. No point dragging it out. Diane put her phone down and looked at me seriously. There's something else. The board is considering whether to pursue legal action against Karen for the cost of this mess. If they do, they might ask you to provide testimony about what she said and did. Will I have to? Probably, if it goes to court. Karen built a 6-figure project on land she didn't verify the HOA owned. If she bypassed normal approval processes or ignored warnings, the board members could argue she's personally responsible for the damages. I don't want to destroy her. You're not destroying her. She destroyed herself by being arrogant and careless. You're just telling the truth about what happened." The easement agreement was signed 2 weeks later in Diane's office. Linda represented the HOA, along with Paul and their attorney Brian. The agreement was detailed and clear. A permanent easement for the entrance structure, precisely mapped and recorded, in exchange for $60,000 paid in quarterly installments over 2 years with 5% interest. The HOA took responsibility for all maintenance and liability related to the entrance. If they defaulted on payment, I could revoke the easement and they'd have to remove the construction. We shook hands when it was done. Linda looked relieved. "Thank you for working with us," she said. "This could have been much worse. I'm glad we found a solution. For what it's worth, the board is investigating what happened. Karen made a lot of decisions about this project without full board approval. We're reviewing whether she exceeded her authority." "What will you do if she did?" "We'll have to see, but at minimum she won't be in a leadership position again." After they left, Diane and I sat in her office as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. "It's over," I said. "Almost. The money still needs to be paid and the entrance needs to be finished. But legally, yes, it's over." "What about us?" She looked at me, and I saw the question in her eyes, the same one I'd been asking myself for weeks. We'd started as attorney and client, but somewhere along the way, it had become something more. The dinners, the conversations, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. "What about us?" she asked. "I'd like to keep seeing you. Not because of the case, because I like who I am when I'm with you." "I like who I am too, when I'm with you." She smiled. "I've been thinking about that. What it means to let someone in, to trust that they won't ask me to be less than I am. You don't do that. You see me working late and bring coffee instead of complaining. You ask questions about my cases and actually listen to the answers. That's rare. You do the same for me. You came to a neighborhood board meeting on a Thursday night because I needed you there. I came because I wanted to. That's the difference." She reached across the desk and took my hand. "Let's see where this goes." So we did. The fall passed in a blur of dinners and weekend trips, long conversations and comfortable silences. Diane's practice stayed busy, and I took on a commission for a bank in Nashville that wanted custom woodwork for their executive offices. We built our lives separately and together, learning each other's rhythms. In October, the HOA resumed construction on the entrance. A new contractor came in to finish what Greg had started, erecting brick columns and planting ornamental trees. It was still elaborate, still designed to make a statement, but now it sat on land the HOA had a legal right to use. I watched it take shape from my living room window, feeling a strange satisfaction. The first payment arrived on schedule in November. $15,000 wired to my account with a formal letter from Linda thanking me for my patience and cooperation. Diane framed the letter as a joke, hanging it in her office under a plaque that read, "Property Rights Matter." In December, I got a call from Paul. "I wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "The board completed its investigation into Karen's handling of the entrance project. We found that she authorized expenditures without proper approval, ignored title questions raised by other board members, and proceeded with construction despite being notified of your ownership claim. The board has voted to seek reimbursement from her for the costs associated with the settlement and legal fees." "How much?" "Close to $90,000, $60,000 for the easement, the rest for attorneys and related costs." "Will she pay?" "She's fighting it, but we have documentation that she acted outside her authority. If necessary, we'll sue. The HOA's insurance might cover some of it, but the carrier is arguing that Karen's conduct was willful, which could exclude coverage." "I'm sorry it came to this." "Don't be. Karen made choices, and choices have consequences. You did nothing wrong." The lawsuit against Karen was filed in January. Diane wasn't involved. It was an internal HOA matter, but she followed the case with professional interest. Karen fought hard, arguing that she'd acted in good faith and that the board had ratified her decisions by approving the entrance project. But the evidence was damning. Emails showed that Paul had asked multiple times whether the property lines had been verified, and Karen had assured him they had without actually ordering a survey. Minutes from board meetings showed Karen presenting the entrance plan as fully vetted when she hadn't done basic due diligence. In March, the court ruled in favor of the HOA. Karen was personally liable for the costs her negligence had caused. She appealed, but the judgment stood. Eventually, she settled, agreeing to pay $50,000 over 5 years. It wiped out her savings and forced her to sell her house in the subdivision. She moved away quietly, and the neighborhood collectively exhaled. The entrance was completed in April, nearly a year after construction had first started. It was beautiful in its own way, the brick columns flanking a gracefully curved drive, landscaping softening the hard edges. The HOA board asked if I'd attend a small dedication ceremony to mark the completion. "You don't have to," Diane said when I told her about the invitation. "After everything they put you through, you'd be justified in skipping it." "I know, but it feels like closure. Besides, I live here. Might as well make peace." "Then I'll come with you." The dedication was held on a Saturday morning in late April. The weather was perfect, spring sunshine and a light breeze carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods. About 50 residents gathered around the new entrance, and Linda stood in front of the brick columns with a microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "This entrance has been a longer journey than any of us anticipated, but I'm proud of the result. It represents not just an improvement to our neighborhood, but a lesson in the importance of diligence, cooperation, and respect for property rights. I want to thank Yates Yancey for his patience and willingness to work with us to find a solution that benefits everyone. Yates, would you like to say a few words?" I hadn't prepared anything, but I walked up and took the microphone. Looking at the faces of my neighbors, I saw curiosity, some lingering resentment, but mostly just relief that the drama was over. "I'm not much for speeches," I said, "but I want to say that this entrance sits on land I own, and I'm glad we found a way to make it work for everyone. Property rights matter, but so does community. We're neighbors, and we'll be neighbors for a long time. I hope we can move forward without grudges and just enjoy living here." There was polite applause. I handed the microphone back to Linda and returned to stand beside Diane, who squeezed my hand. After the ceremony, people mingled, eating cookies and drinking lemonade that someone had set up on a folding table. Several neighbors came over to introduce themselves or apologize for believing Karen's version of events. Patricia, the woman who'd visited me during the dispute, brought her husband over. "I'm glad this worked out," she said, "and I'm glad you're staying. Some people thought you might move after all the trouble." "This is my home," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Diane and I stayed until the crowd thinned, then walked back toward my house. The entrance looked different now, knowing it was legal, knowing the HOA had paid for the right to use my land. It wasn't a monument to overreach anymore. It was just an entrance, serving its purpose. "How do you feel?" Diane asked. "Good, relieved, ready to move on." "Me too." We'd been talking about moving in together, Diane and I, trying to figure out logistics. Her office was in Murfreesboro. My workshop was at my house. We both liked our spaces but wanted more time together. The easement money had given me flexibility. I was thinking about expanding the garage, adding a studio space that Diane could use for a home office on days she didn't need to be downtown. "I was thinking," I said as we walked, "what if we used some of the easement money to build onto the garage, make it a real workshop and add an office for you? Then you could work from here when you want, and we wouldn't have to drive back and forth constantly." "That's a big step." "I know, but I'm ready if you are." Diane stopped walking and turned to face me. The morning sun lit her face, and she looked happy in a way I'd come to love. "I'm ready," she said. "We spent the summer designing the addition. I drew plans for a workshop that would double the size of the garage, with space for all my tools and a proper finishing room. Diane worked with an architect to design an office that had good light and built-in shelves for all her legal references. We argued about where to put windows and whether the roof should match the house or complement the garage aesthetic. It was the kind of arguing that couples do when they're building something together, where the disagreements are really about making sure both people feel heard. Construction started in August. A crew came in to pour the foundation while I worked on furniture projects in the existing garage space, sawdust and concrete mixing in the air. Diane spent evenings reviewing blueprints and making lists of furniture and equipment we'd need. We were building a life, literally and figuratively, using the money the HOA had paid for their entrance to create something that was ours. In September, a year after the court ruling, the addition was finished. My workshop gleamed with new equipment, organized and efficient. Diane's office had a big desk facing windows that looked out on the trees behind the property, shelves lined with law books and files, a comfortable chair for reading. We hosted a small party to celebrate, inviting friends and a few neighbors who'd become friends through the whole ordeal. Paul and Linda came, bringing wine and congratulations. "This is beautiful work," Paul said, admiring the joinery on the cabinets I'd built for Diane's office. "You're talented." "Thank you. It's what I love doing." "Better than fighting with the HOA, I imagine." "Much better, though I learned a lot from that fight." "What did you learn?" "That property rights matter, but so does compromise. That standing up for yourself doesn't mean being cruel, and that having a good attorney makes all the difference." I looked at Diane across the room, laughing at something Linda had said. "Among other things," Paul smiled. "Among other things, indeed." The second year of easement payments arrived on schedule, quarter by quarter, until the full $60,000 had been paid. Diane and I joked about framing the final check, but instead, we put the money in a savings account marked for future projects. Maybe a vacation, maybe more renovations, maybe just security for whatever life brought next. Karen's name came up occasionally in neighborhood gossip. She'd moved to a condo in Franklin and kept a low profile, the restitution payments bleeding her account every month. I felt a complicated mix of sympathy and satisfaction. She'd tried to steamroll me, had assumed that confidence and authority were enough to override documented property rights. She'd been wrong, and the consequences had been severe. But I took no joy in her suffering. I just wanted to move forward. In November, Diane and I went back to the winery in Leiper's Fork, the same place we'd gone the summer before when the case was still unresolved and our relationship was still new. We sat on the same patio, drinking the same wine, but everything felt different. Settled, sure. "A year ago, we were sitting here wondering how this would end," Diane said. "The case, I mean." "And us?" "Maybe that too. I wasn't sure if what we had was just crisis bonding or something real. What do you think now?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "I think it's real. I think we built something good out of a bad situation. And I think we're going to keep building." I like the sound of that. We stayed at the winery until dark, watching the stars come out over the Tennessee hills, talking about plans and possibilities. When we finally drove home, the entrance to Sycamore Ridge Estates was lit by tasteful landscape lighting, the brick columns glowing warm in the night. It sat on my land, legally and properly, a reminder of what I'd fought for and won. But more than that, it was just part of the landscape now, a feature of the neighborhood where I'd chosen to live and build a life. I pulled into my driveway and looked at the house, at the workshop addition where I'd spend tomorrow working on a commissioned piece, at the lights in Diane's office where she'd left a lamp on. It was home, earned and defended and shared. Diane got out of the car and walked around to meet me, slipping her hand into mine as we walked to the door. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For seeing what needed to be done and helping me do it the right way. For making sure I didn't just react out of anger. For turning this into something I can live with." "You did that yourself. I just provided the roadmap." "You provided more than that." She kissed me, there in the driveway under the stars, and I thought about how strange life was, how a concrete mixer showing up uninvited could lead to all of this. The lawsuit, the settlement, the relationship, the future we were building together. It had started with someone pouring concrete on my land without permission, and it had ended with me standing in front of my house with the woman I loved, grateful for every difficult step that had brought us here. The entrance to Sycamore Ridge Estates still sits on my lot, beautiful and legal and paid for. The HOA maintains it according to the easement agreement, and I walk past it every day without anger or regret. It's a monument now, not to Karen's overreach, but to the importance of doing things right, of standing up for what's yours while still finding room for compromise and community. And in my workshop, surrounded by wood and tools and the smell of sawdust, I build furniture that will last generations, each piece carefully joined and finished, each one a reminder that the best things are built slowly, with attention and care and respect for what came before. Just like the life Diane and I are building together, one day and one decision at a time, on land that's mine by right and ours by choice. The dispute that started with concrete and conflict ended with cooperation and connection. The entrance they built on my lot became the entrance we share, legally protected and mutually maintained. And the woman who helped me navigate the legal maze became the woman who shares my home, my work, my future. Sometimes the best victories aren't about winning everything, but about finding the solution that lets everyone move forward. The HOA got their entrance. I got fair compensation and clear title. The neighborhood got peace, and I got Diane, which might be the most valuable outcome of all. On weekends, we sit on the porch and watch neighbors drive through the entrance, their cars passing over land I own under an easement I granted. And I feel something I didn't expect to feel when this started. Contentment. The fight was worth it, not because I crushed an enemy, but because I stood up for my rights in a way that I can be proud of. Firm but fair, principled but practical, angry but not vindictive. That's the legacy of the entrance on my lot. Not conflict but resolution. Not division, but community built on respect for boundaries and rights. It's there every morning when I wake up, and it'll be there long after I'm gone. A permanent reminder that doing things right matters more than doing them fast, and that the best solutions are the ones where everyone can walk away with dignity and tact. The story could have ended differently. I could have fenced the lot immediately and trapped the neighborhood with inadequate access, watching from my window as they struggled with the consequences of Karen's arrogance. I could have demanded twice what the easement was worth, leveraging their desperation into profit. I could have been as ruthless as Karen was reckless. But I didn't, and that's the point. You can stand up for yourself without becoming the villain of your own story. You can fight for what's yours without destroying what matters. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something better than what was there before, and sharing it with someone who helped you see the way forward when you couldn't see it yourself. The entrance sits on my lot, and I'm glad it's there. It's a beginning, not an end, a threshold that marks the boundary between what was and what will be. Every time I drive through it, I think about that morning when cement mixers woke me and I walked outside to find strangers working on my land. I think about Karen's certainty, Paul's reasonableness, Diane's steady guidance. I think about how close I came to making choices I'd regret, and how grateful I am for the path I chose instead. That's the real story of the entrance on my lot. Not just the legal battle or the settlement or even the relationship that grew from it. It's about the kind of person you want to be when someone wrongs you, and whether you can find a way to make things right that doesn't require making everything worse first. I found that way, with help from a smart attorney who became so much more. And now, standing here with the finished entrance behind me and the rest of my life ahead, I know I made the right choice. The only choice I could live with. The choice that let me keep my land, my dignity, and my soul intact. The entrance they built on my lot is ours now, legally and permanently, a shared space built on respect and compromise. And that's exactly how it should be.